Hey, Tom, Coach Kyle here. Great questions about running form and more specifically, uh, foot strike. And you mentioned that you transitioned on purpose to being a forefoot striker, landing on the ball of your foot. And you used to be a heel striker. And you mentioned that I think the last long run you did, you purposely did some more rear foot striking. And you noticed some differences in how your muscles felt, how your form felt a little bit. And you asked, like, is there any reason to favor one or the other? What are the benefits, etc. And typically, I don't do much with running form because your body has already heavily adapted to the form it's always been using. And unless a runner is really doing something like massive overstriding, really low cadence, like under 160, I typically don't do much with their running form. And again, because your body has already most likely heavily adapted to how it's already moving. And another thing to keep in mind is that research has shown that runners are actually really bad at being self-aware of what their running technique is and what their foot strike is. And a lot of people, in one study in particular that I'm thinking of, who said their midfoot or forefoot strikers were heel strikers, and some of the heel strikers thought they were midfoot or forefoot strikers. So um, like unless you're watching a video of you running, it's hard to say what you're doing, and that your form, your foot strike can change over time. Your cadence, your foot strike can mine. I know I'm primarily a midfoot striker, but I forefoot strike and I heel strike too, and it just depends on the slope of the terrain, how long the run is, my fatigue level. Did I run in the morning or not? Am I running at, you know, a 640 pace or a 940 pace? All that matters. With myself, I don't pay any attention to where I'm making initial ground contact. Um, but I found a few graphics and an article I want to go through here that I think kind of really, portray this really well. So this one right here, and this is a familiar running form, and this is unfortunately very common, where the posture out of balance. And I've seen some very fast runners at our track this morning, at the track doing track workouts, and they're actually leaning backwards when they're running. You can see somebody running by on the other side of the bike path, and they're leaning backwards. So that is one thing you really want to avoid, is not to lean backwards like this runner here on the left. um, Heel strike, I'm not against heel striking. Now this is a really bad heel strike. I'm If you're heel striking like this, that could be a problem. Now, a glancing rear foot strike, where your rear foot just touches the ground a smidge before the rest of the foot, nothing wrong with that. But if you're doing this, where you're landing with a really pronounced heel strike, and the heel is out in front of the knee when it's making ground contact, and your knee is, God forbid, even straight with this, that's a problem. That's probably going to get you injured. That is something we would work on for sure. Now, this good running form, good running form. But again, like if I'm running at a 940 pace, I might look more like this guy. And I'm not going to be doing this. I'm not going to be leaning back like that, but I'm not going to look like this guy. This is like my 640 pace guy, where I know I'm noticeably leaning forward. My arms are compact and in high cadence. Typically, like my normal easy run technique is probably somewhere in the middle of these two people. Next slide here. And so this is something I like to show people as well, as again, you know, knee is almost straight, way out in front of his body when he's making initial ground contact with a huge heel strike. On the flip side, it still looks like a little bit of a heel strike, but that's something called a glancing heel strike, a glancing rear foot strike. And it's under his knee. So like this, no problem at all. And his hands are even up a little tighter here. So like this, that's a fantastic that's a fantastic heel strike. Nothing wrong with that heel strike. That's a glancing heel strike, basically a whole foot strike. And like his lean is about the same with each one. So, but he's not leaning backwards. And then this is a really nice article from Jay Dishery and his book, um, Running Form. I have it, and it's fantastic. And he talks about a lot of the muscles. And he says when you run, especially as your speed increases, more and more oomph needs to come from the muscles that extend the hips back. That's more that, but that's likely. It's likely that years of overstriding have wired your muscle memory to favor the quads and neglect the glutes. Simply, the typical runner is quad heavy and glute light. Most runners overstride. The data I've collected over the decades reveals why. The vast majority of runners don't know how to fully use the muscles on their backside. So what they often do is they overstride out in front of them with a long stride going forward, but their legs don't move back at all. And I passed one lady on the bike path today, and I swear to God, her knees were barely moving in any direction at all, and her like lower legs were just flipping back and forth, and, and um, she wasn't using. She has all this power in her quads, even her hamstrings, her glutes. She wasn't using any of it. But it's very common that people will stride out in front of them, but they don't have a long stride behind them either. And this is he's talking just about this. It would be much easier if the muscle control was balanced around the body. The reality is most people are out of balance. Problem that's not exclusive to running. Lower cross syndrome to describe the imbalance that occurs when the hip flexors, quads, and low back muscles are tight and overused, and the deep core and glute max are asleep at the wheel. The typical runner is quad heavy and glute light. Early chapters of Running Rewired reveal that the best way to inhibit the muscles around your hips is to screw up your posture. And then there's the issue of tight hips. If those muscles are tight, your hips won't have full extension, so you want to be able to move your legs, all out in front of you and out behind you. If those muscles are tight, your hips won't have full extension to both sides of the pelvis. This imbalance isn't a running problem; it's a body problem, and that's why so much of the routines I do are hip, glute, and core, general strength and mobility. It's about not so much flexibility, but being able to relax and move your muscles in a good range of motion. Your quads are big muscles capable of producing a huge amount of force. No matter what your running form, you need your quads to show up ready to work. But muscles don't act alone, and we certainly don't want the quads to carry the torch when running. Changing your dominant muscles for moving and running is critical to improving joint health and imbalance. The problem with quad dependency, so the glute max, your butt basically, has three primary functions, all of which benefit your running. I go into detail on the importance of the role, blah blah blah. The glute max is incredibly powerful, fatigue resistant. They drive your hip from the front of your body to the back. Your quads do the opposite. So your quads bring your muscles, your legs, forward and up. Your glute down and up. Like that's that power to move you forward and up. Glute max, also the primary hip external rotator. The glute max prevents your knees from crashing in when you run, and it plays a huge role in postural control. If your glute isn't firing properly, your torso will pitch forward and cause you to overstride. Overstriding means very high loading rates with each step. And there's some glute exercises, single leg deadlifts. I did a bunch of those this morning. Kettlebell squats. I did mine. I didn't have any weights, so I did mine out in the park after my 10 miler today. And suitcase carry, a good one. So, and then you mentioned that your muscles felt different, and that's true as well. And some people they ask, like, is there one running technique or form that's better than the other? And there's not. Um, they're just different. And like you said, a midfoot strike, you felt it more in the calves, and that's true. So like if somebody has a historical calf problem, midfoot or forefoot strike might not be best for them because it really loads the calves quite a bit. However, it has a little less torque on the knee. And a rear foot strike puts more loading on the knee, a little more torque on the knee, a little less on the calf. And actually, compartment syndrome is like if this is your shin, you have your shin muscle right here, and compartment syndrome is when the sheath around that shin muscle won't allow the muscle to expand fully. That's compartment syndrome. And so there's research showing that, so it's a shin thing. And there's research showing that a midfoot strike landing with a flatter foot loads the shin less and is a little beneficial for people suffering from compartment syndrome because it loads, puts less pressure on that shin. So, but it puts more pressure and loading on your calves. So if you have a calf problem, you might not want to, do a heavy midfoot strike. So I hope that was helpful. If you have any more questions or comments, please let me know. But check out. Let me go where is that. So check out Jay Dishery's Running Rewired. That's what it was. That's a good book. The the other one, the other one is Running Form by Owen J. Anderson, PhD. Also a good book. I have both of them. So hope that was helpful.